This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
You can only improve as much as you allow yourself to improve.
Hey everybody, welcome to Crime Over Cocktails. I'm Tiffany, your host, and today I'm with my guest, Emerald.
Hi, my name is Emerald, and I am a sex and relationships therapist at Togetherness Therapy, a private practice based in West Los Angeles. I specialize in interracial relationships, sexual trauma, painful sex, and sexual incompatibility. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so happy to have you. You definitely have done a lot of schooling.
Yes. Yeah, so my graduate degree actually took 3 years. So it was a 3-year Master of Science program in counseling. And then I got additional certificates in higher education, career counseling, and clinical counseling as well. But it wasn't until after I completed my undergraduate degree that I knew I wanted to follow my heart and actually do counseling or therapy for a couple of reasons. So my undergraduate degree was in communication disorders with a minor in psychology. So at first I thought I wanted to be a speech pathologist. So I went down that route. I was a speech language pathology assistant for about a year, but something kept pulling me toward like the counseling side, really wanting to counsel parents who had kids with disabilities. I tutored kids with disabilities myself in my high school and then during college as well. So something about the counseling side and really just allowing myself to practice that empathy really like sparked something in me. But the hesitancy of going into therapy or counseling was one, I heard that therapists or counselors don't make all that much money. And this was like many years ago. So obviously I know, where the money is now, and I know what different agencies offer different salary rates and what populations to work with. And what's really cool too is that you can specialize. So that really pulled me to it. But let me talk about the hesitancies first. So the financial side, wanting to have a stable career, and also just finding a career that would allow me to like develop a career in which I wouldn't need as much schooling, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue with higher education. I actually didn't know I wanted to go to college in the first place. I grew up in a very wealthy community, and everyone was just talking about college this, college that, and I just never understood that because I never thought of myself as an academic. So it wasn't until grad school where I started getting really good grades, and I was like, wait, I'm actually getting this now. Like something just clicked. So upon completing my undergraduate degree, I got rejected from the master's program for speech, but I got accepted into the counseling program. So I took that, I ran with it, and I was the only Asian American in my cohort to graduate. And that posed its own challenges too. On top of that, I was the only one who was wanting to pursue sex therapy. Professors didn't really know about it. Colleagues didn't really have an interest in that. It was still taboo too. But I realized that the disability community does not have as many resources as able-bodied individuals, which is where my edge kind of comes in, is I specialize in sexuality and disability. So kind of forming my career around rehabilitation counseling, which includes like substance use, previously incarcerated individuals, trying to rehabilitate back into society, and then also the disability community, particularly autism spectrum disorder. So I hope this isn't sounding confusing.
No.
Okay. So then I did a lot of work with the disability community, and I found that that's really where my heart resides. And I realized that they don't have mental health resources either, or not as many, even for the able-bodied community. Like neurotypical individuals, we also don't really talk about mental health as much either. So there is a lot of stigma around sexuality, mental health. And that's why I want to be that mediator to, one, get those resources out there for the people who need it most, but also normalize it as being part of the human experience.
Right. I do feel like sex, especially, I mean, back in like the 50s and everything, oh my God, like I don't even think you could say the word sex. So it's definitely come a long way, but some people definitely do still, they see it as taboo.
Exactly. And actually, you sparked my other thought too in talking about relationships and interracial relationships too, which is another specialty of mine. I actually just presented at a research conference in DC to present research on the interracial and intraracial, which is same race couples, and whether they experience relationship milestones similarly. And we found that there were no significant differences in them experiencing different relationship milestones. Now, this is a poster. It's not a publication or anything. And we did find our sample at a large West Coast university where diversity is a very major thing. But that does show just, like you said, like the taboo of talking about sex and the taboo of maybe being in an interracial relationship, taboo around mental health. So there's a lot of different things in play where I feel like it's multifaceted, multi-layered, that kind of push us further away from normalizing these topics, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I do feel like we've come a long way, but it's almost like we go a long way, but then certain higher powers like to bring us back to the Stone Age. So it's constantly that fight against, we want to be free. We want to be who we are. We want to love whoever we want to love. But then other people are still telling us that we can't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's hard. I mean, how can you be free and not be free at the same time? Do you see a lot of that coming in to see you? Like people who are just like, I just want to be happy, but I'm being told I can't.
I actually do see that quite a bit. It's devastating sometimes, but it's also, it kind of sparks a glimmer of hope too, because my clients, they do have that positivity in themselves to want to be happy, but there are different factors that are playing a role in hindering some of that happiness, whether that be previous sexual trauma or previous abuse from family upbringing, mental health disorders such as anxiety disorder, PTSD, depression, right? So I do see that quite a bit in people wanting to be happy, but there are different factors hindering them from really experiencing that full potential, whether that be like I said, like these are more internal factors and external being the trauma that they may have experienced. And then, as you mentioned, like especially in society too, portraying like things should be a certain way, portraying certain gender roles, let's say. But yeah, that is something that I do see in my clients. Like personal experience too, right? Even as a therapist, I'm also human. And there are things that I've also experienced too that make it hard for me to experience true happiness. So I can truly empathize with clients and helping people in their relationships. Sometimes it can be very hard to communicate things to partners. So I would be kind of that mediator to help with, okay, how can we communicate that in a manner that's not attacking, but in a very welcoming way so that partners truly understand each other.
Right. Are they at the same session or do you do them separately?
Oh, no, it's the same session. So like couples therapy, they have the same time. Yeah.
Gotcha. I didn't know if like, okay, I have it with one person, then bring you together. And
sometimes there will be times when like it would be helpful to split the couple and then bring them back because there can be like high tensions.
I can totally see that.
Sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll be like, okay, let's take a break. Let's do individuals first. Then we'll come back.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome to the Growing Up Bananas podcast. My name is Ethan. This is my co-host Sam. What are we doing here? The podcast will explore the internal battle of not just Asian immigrants, but every immigrant, whether it's staying true to thousands of years of culture that our parents passed on to us and their parents passed on to them, or assimilating to what we see around us. So why the bananas?
Well, a banana was a slur used for an Asian person who'd lost touch with their heritage. Yellow on the outside, white on the inside. Growing up is hard enough as it is, and we find ourselves in a situation where we're not quite Asian enough for the Asians, and unfortunately aren't able to change the colour of our skin.
Unless you're MJ.
Well, that's true.
We've been thinking about it, and as travel becomes more accessible, the world will become more intertwined. With that, the number of people who go through the same ups and downs of living in a foreign country, like we did, will rise. We want to share these experiences with you.
Throughout the journey, we're inviting a series of guests to share their compelling stories with us. We hope to have the likes of Dami Im, Jeremy Lin, Jackie Chan, and Ando, who will hopefully join us as guests along the way.
Follow us on socials to stay updated with Growing Up Bananas, and we look forward to sharing our stories with you.
People who have been through sexual trauma, how do you navigate that? What does that look like for a client to come see you who has been through sexual trauma?
Yeah, so I want to explain to you like the initial steps first, starting from like the consultation. So people can find me on Psychology Today, they can find me on like Instagram, right? And they'll reach out with a message. And I offer like 15-minute free consultations, right? So I'll have a consultation with them, and the initial conversation is usually just tell me a little bit about yourself, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my therapeutic approaches, and I'll answer any questions that I'll be able to address for you. So kind of building that initial rapport is very important. And then once we kind of get the rates and the availability all settled, then we actually have our first session. And in that first session, my primary approaches is to use what's called trauma-informed care, which is a foundational approach where you understand that that person or that everyone comes with some form of trauma, whether that be hurt or just life just threw them a bunch of curveballs and we didn't know how to handle it. So just understanding that they are coming to heal. And then the other component too is offering a very welcoming and warm space for them to talk about difficult subjects. So that is my first and foremost thing. Offer empathy, be welcoming, and listen empathetically as well. Other approaches that I use with clients who experience or have experienced sexual trauma and are healing is cognitive processing therapy. So I really like cognitive processing therapy because it allows you to go a little bit deeper. My sessions are very hard, so I commend all of my clients for sticking with me. I would consider myself as a harder therapist, more challenging, because I do probe a bit. I don't really beat around the bush, especially when it comes down to talking about the incident or the assault, for example. And sometimes I'll pull from different interventions. Of course, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of like I would say it's kind of a gold standard, but that doesn't have to be your primary thing to be a great therapist. Like I use that as, like I pull from those interventions, but I don't use that as my primary. My primary would be the ones that I've mentioned. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely. I mean, the process, how you go into it. What are some of the complaints that they have? Is it that they're scared to be intimate again? Is it that they can't get to orgasm? Like, what is it that they want help with?
Yeah, pretty much all of those things that you've mentioned. Wanting to be intimate, I'll expand on that. But yes, wanting to be intimate, maybe seeing genders differently. Maybe if for example, their perpetrator was male, for example, then not being able to trust people as much as they used to. Symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder actually include hypervigilance or not being able to sleep. So maybe helping to mitigate some of those symptoms of daily living that affect daily life activities. I mean, like if you're not able to sleep and you're not able to walk to your work or to your car, like that can be very debilitating and very anxiety ridden.
Bad for your mental
I'll help
health.
with mitigating that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it does hurt mental health a bit. So in our sessions, I would teach skills like some breathing or grounding techniques that you can use. I can talk about that more later too, but I don't want to get too off topic. Or we'll talk about tools that can help mitigate the symptoms that are a result of the sexual trauma. And as far as dealing with the actual trauma and processing it, now that one is actually very difficult, and that's what they come to see me for. A lot of times clients wait months or even years before they seek professional help. And that's where I come into, is that I understand, and I'm not judging them for coming to help later in life. Everyone has their own pace, and I think it's very extremely important that therapists do accept the client for where they're at and meet them there too. So they're not ready to talk about the assault, I don't push them to talk about it. I will have an open, transparent conversation. How much is this bothering you? Are you thinking about it every day? How often are you thinking about it? And then I'll offer different interventions we can use to help process. But if they're not ready, I'm not pushing. I'm just going to be there.
Right.
To listen. Yeah.
I've had quite a few guests on my show now, and a lot of them, it seems to be 30 years is a popular number. They kept it secret for 30 years. That is a long time to hold on to such trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a very long time.
I couldn't imagine. And never telling anyone, like they were married. They never told their spouses. Like, absolutely crazy. But I get it, I guess. Like, you're shamed and you're embarrassed. A lot of times they blame themselves, which you should never do. It's not your fault something happened to you. It's not what you wore. It's not that you were drinking. It's, like there's boundaries in life, and people don't always respect those boundaries.
Exactly. Yeah. And on that point too, actually, you bring up a really great point. I know it's very easy for survivors to feel like it was somehow their fault. And that is part of that trauma response and the mentality of, let me justify this somehow. And a lot of times it's hard for people to admit, especially people who are very empathetic and very kind-hearted. It's hard for them to say, no, they are the bad person, that the perpetrator or the person who did this to me is bad. And instead they'll internalize, I did something. I kept going back. I wore this, skirt, or I was drunk. But regardless of all of those reasons, you didn't give that person the okay to do that to you. They decided to cross that boundary. They decided to impose this onto you, right? And I think that's where a lot of the heavy lifting comes in therapy, is we talk about that. We talk about trying to unhook some of those narratives that we're telling ourselves, some of those negative beliefs that we have about ourselves. And part of my role as a therapist is being on your side, and that you're not alone in this, and that whatever you say, I'm not changing my stance. If someone imposed something onto you and they hurt you in some way and they cross that boundary, when you either verbally or actively did something or not do something too, and I'll talk about that in a moment, it's not your fault. People may say oh yeah, it's your fault because you did this, or maybe sometimes friends don't really know what the right response is. But we have to remember too that there are 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and appease. We don't really talk about those last 2. In schooling, I learned it in schooling, but before that, I thought there was just 2 trauma responses, whether you fight or you fly, right? But these last 2, freeze and appease, I see this a lot in my clients, and it helps, and it does not help that they didn't know about these 2, because they've been holding on to that shame that they didn't do anything. But the freeze response, which is to not do anything, that is a response. Your body decided that not doing anything was the best way to survive. And that is a response. And the other one, appeasing, meaning just going with it, doing what they are telling you to do. That is also a survival technique, because by doing what they are telling you to do, you are surviving and you are here today. So yeah, those are the 4 different responses, and that's what I work through with my clients too. And that's what I would tell other survivors, is really consider your role in how you survived.
Right. So you've worked with ex-sex predators. So you got to see,
yes.
You get to see it on both sides.
Now I see it on both sides, yes. So I've worked with previously incarcerated individuals who have been convicted of a sex crime. And before that, I did work with individuals who had substance use addiction. So I worked with people who were just recently released from prison. And what's actually kind of sad about this is I started that position right when COVID hit. And one of the things that we saw one of the things I realized was that these people were getting released from prison, but they were getting released into a society where everyone was quarantined. Mm-hmm. So the rehabilitation process for them was probably re-traumatizing. And that I saw that a lot. And that was pretty sad to see. A lot of my clients too were homeless. So we would do our sessions like on the phone, and they wouldn't know where they would be sleeping or where their next meal would be. That was with my first clinical position. My second position was with sex offenders, and these were mandated treatment sessions, which means that if they didn't do the sessions, then they would be written up basically, and either be put back in jail, or they'll get some sort of like punishment, like a court date, jail, or sometimes if they reoffend, they'll go back into prison as well. I had a really large caseload, and so did my colleagues, which contributed to therapist burnout, which is another whole topic that we can discuss later. But yeah, so with my work with them, it was really hard to do because you can't force therapy onto someone, even if it's mandated. And I told them that. I'm a very transparent therapist, and I will tell them like it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. And so I would tell them, like, guys, I can't force you to do therapy. I can't force you to listen, but I do ask for your respect. And I do ask that when we have our sessions, that you are listening. And if you're not listening, then mute yourself, because most of the sessions were actually telephonic. So imagine being on the phone with 9 other men, me being the only counselor in that call, and trying to get people to mute their phone when they don't know how to mute their phone, and trying to do therapy with them. It's very hard. So the work that I did was I tried to do more foundational work, understanding cognitive distortions, talking about family upbringing, talking about core beliefs. But when talking about sex-related things, that's when they would get triggered, which is understandable. And a lot of times they would say that majority of people do not admit to their offense, but the small minority that did, I can see that they were very hurt and still carried that pain with them. And they will probably die still feeling that pain. It's not to justify their behaviors. I do think that what they did is wrong. And as a counselor, I was able to see how their upbringing or how their experiences led them to that decision. So yeah, just back to your point, I did get to see both sides. I've always wanted to work with sexual trauma survivors. And I also found this place where I can work with sex offenders first. So now I see both sides. It's very interesting.
I bet. Do you believe they can be rehabilitated?
I think some, yes. I'm not going to say everyone, because you really need to want it for yourself. And for those people who don't even admit to it, probably not. I feel like a rule I have is like, you can only improve as much as you would allow yourself to improve.
I love that.
So yeah, I do think that people can rehabilitate. Absolutely. I think everyone has the potential to. Whether you want it or not, that's going to either increase or decrease your chances of actually getting rehabilitated. So yeah, that's my short answer.
I mean, I get that. Obviously, it's like with anything, if you smoke cigarettes, if you're an alcoholic, if you like to gamble, if you want help and you need to quit, you have to do it for yourself. You can't do it for your family. You can't do it for your new boyfriend or, you have to do it for yourself. It's the only way it's going to stick.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Have any of your clients reoffended and then you had to be like, why are we doing this again?
I've had clients who relapsed. So they relapsed into doing drugs again. And then I've had people who had to terminate with me because they went back in jail or they, to my knowledge, I don't think I had people who reoffended, but I did hear colleagues who had people who reoffended. So it's sad when you hear that, especially when it's from people that you really had faith in.
Yeah, I bet that's hard.
Right. It is quite hard. And that's what made the position challenging. And that's partially what made it a little easier to get burned out, especially for substance use counselors. If you keep trying and trying and trying to motivate your clients to not pick up that cigarette or not deal drugs again. Like if you're doing that every week with 20 plus clients, you can get kind of burned out. So that's why it's very important to take care of yourself. And I'm not trying to use the term self-care loosely. I do mean it in the way of doing active self-care, doing something every single day for yourself. And that's something that I'm still trying to work on too. I don't just try to preach things to my clients. I do try and use either the same techniques or modifying it for myself because it is very important. And kind of like the putting on your mask first, in the airplane, you got to take care of yourself first because then the energy that you're exerting out is either not going to be as great or it's not going to be as strong for other people either.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have self-love. You have to have all that stuff if you want to move in the right direction. So is that something just in California where they have to go to classes and stuff? Because I would love for all prisons and jails to do that. I think that's very important because some of these guys might not even know why they do what they do. And if we can get to the core of that and make them understand, they have a better chance of not ever doing it again.
That's the ideal point, right? Is that they would understand and that they would not reoffend. But there's problems in our system too.
Oh, there's a lot of problems.
Yes. Particularly with the rehabilitation side. And now people might not like what I'm going to say, but being a counselor in that position as a forensic clinician, I don't know if it's working.
Really?
Yeah, because they're not accepting the help. Like I said, right? You have to want to get better, to improve. It's like we're trying to force this idea upon them when they don't even think they did anything wrong. So take yourself, for example, right? Let's say you always believed that you cut apples a certain way. The way you slice an apple, right? However you slice it. And someone comes and tells you, you've been doing it all wrong. But you truly believe that the way that you cut the apple is correct. There's nothing wrong with how you cut the apple. But someone keeps telling you, hey, it's wrong, it's wrong. You know what? Go into therapy and then this is going to help you. But you don't think you're wrong. So then this whole time you're trying to fight your therapist and tell them, I'm not cutting it wrong. Here, let me show you how I'm cutting it. Right? How far are we really going to get if every week we're arguing about how to cut the apple? Now, that's not the same as a sex offense. Definitely not the same. These are two totally different scale metaphors, right? Cutting an apple is not as big a deal as going over someone's boundary or harming them. So it's kind of a similar idea in that we can't force this upon them. Some, yes, I think not forced, but some they do want to get better, so they will listen. I had some really great clients who listened to me and asked questions and did their homework and would get upset when other people were talking over them or being disruptive. And it sucked because these people really wanted to get better. The reason why I think it might not be working is because if they feel mandated and they are having issues getting jobs, or they don't understand how to maintain a structure or a schedule, it's like these small things that are extremely difficult for someone who just got released to do. Because right when they got released, they were expected to get a job, make money. Okay, first of all, getting a job is hard for anyone. So building a resume, cover letter, getting an interview, getting a job, court meetings, having a parole officer who you have to report to, having an ankle monitor. So all my clients had ankle monitors, right? Having mandated therapy twice a week on top of individual therapy. And if they missed one session, it was my job to contact the parole officer and write them up, which would then disrupt their schedule again. So yes, ideally we would have more facilities that do this, but I'm afraid of, do we have the right structure for this? Is it actually helping? I know there's another facility in another state. I can't think of the state right now, but they have a program that actually worked. I don't know too much about it. Some people will argue that the facilities we have do work. I'm sure there are some programs that are outstanding. I just don't know if the ones that we have here are as good as it can be. Do they really promote true rehabilitation?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if any program can honestly say 100% successful, because things fail all the time. Teachers, not every class is going to make straight A's. You're going to have a couple F's here and there. That's just the way it is. Just kind of like, not everyone's going to like you. Not, like you're,
exactly.
It's life. But if at least it's possible to make these people better than when they went in, I mean, I think it's freaking worth to try for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. I 100% agree with you. If there is some way that they can improve just a little bit, I mean, that's what I would want too. And I hope that they would want that too.
Right.
That they realize, hey, maybe that wasn't the right way to go about things. I'm going to change.
Especially when it comes to children. Like, what you did to that child now set this child on a completely different path for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
It's about taking ownership for what you did. But I don't know if they even look at it that way.
I don't want to generalize because there were a few, and I'm thinking as we're talking, I'm thinking about the few that really stood out to me. But the ones that didn't, like it is about accountability. It is about taking ownership. That's what made the position so difficult. Being, coming from an Asian background and obviously looking very Asian and younger is hard, not only because then in their eyes, like in some people's eyes, how can I teach anything that's worthwhile to them if they've been on this earth 2 or 3 times longer than I have, right? I mean, that's a fair statement. But also me going over like the police report with them, or like just reading it myself and then sitting in front of them, certain people, is hard to hear when it's just excuses left to right. I was framed. I didn't do it. Misunderstanding. Like, you can tell the excuses. Is it impossible that happened? No, it's not impossible, but to get a court case onto a sex offense, it's a bit more difficult than just, oh, hey, they did this. Okay, cool. Like, we're going to put you in prison now. Like, it's really not that easy. Hence why a lot of sexual trauma survivors don't go to the cops.
They get re-victimized over and over again.
And over again. Exactly. Which causes them to get re-traumatized again. And then that affects their self-esteem.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's a trauma cycle. Our system isn't perfect, and I really hope that there's better ways. But it's a really difficult challenge.
I'm sure. Trying to help control any other person is a chore in itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's actually what I tell people is we can't control anyone else's behaviors, only our own. And I actually learned that from my personal therapist, a previous one that I used to see. I'm in therapy now, and I love it. Great therapist, who I have now, which I am very blessed to meet her. And yeah, we can't control other people's behaviors, only our own. And I think that's a pretty good thing to follow, because then it takes off a lot of that burdening from yourself. And also acceptance plays a role in that too. Accepting that, okay, I can't change that person. Like if someone's toxic, for example.
Yes. Toxic people, they give me anxiety. Do you still take on new clients?
I actually have a couple of spots left. So I do take on new clients. My target population is neurodiverse individuals. So people who have ADHD or suspected or autism, other mental illnesses. So that's also who I serve. But I don't know if I said this before, but I'm a sex and relationships therapist, which means that we specialize in sex and relationships. So I see individuals and couples. And I cater to interracial relationships. I'm personally in an interracial relationship myself, so I can understand some of the ins and outs of it, like the challenges that you might experience, sexual trauma, and painful sex. So for particularly women who experience pain during sex, that is also a specialty of mine. And then I think I had one more. Oh yeah, sexual incompatibility. So if there's like desire discrepancy between partners, or libidos are different, or one person wants to do kinks, the other one doesn't, how can we find that middle ground? So really sexual intimacy and emotional intimacy as well. So yeah, if you know anyone, or if listeners who are listening have friends who think I would be a great fit, feel free to send them my way. I do have a couple.
Absolutely. Yes. And actually, so I have started a nonprofit, and it's called the Crime Connection. And what I want to do is start pairing some of my guests with people who need help in these areas. And so I would pay for their first session. So say if somebody's like, oh, I want to see you, for instance, I would pay for their first session so they could experience it, see if it's a good fit. And then if it is, then they would continue to pay you from there on. Would you be interested in joining my panel?
Yeah, I'd be highly interested. I think that's wonderful that you're doing that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Do you do only Zoom, or you do in person and Zoom? Like, can they be from anywhere? Do they kind of need to be from the California area and surrounding states?
Yeah, so I'm only licensed in California right now. And I do telehealth, so through Zoom. And then I don't have any more availability for in-person, unfortunately, at this time.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'll get a form over to you when I starts rolling more about like your perfect client, because I want everyone to be happy and everyone to be a perfect fit. So
yeah, of course. I think that's really nice that you're doing that. I'd be happy to offer like a discounted rate too, so that you don't have to pay the full fee for the first session. You can cut that out if you want. But yeah.
I mean, I'll pay the full price. The only thing I ask them for return is just a donation of your choice. It could be $5. I don't care, just to the cause.
Okay, yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Because there's so many things out there that people haven't tried, like, and maybe they don't want to put the money out, like, would you also be considered like a sexologist or?
So that's different. Yeah. Sexologists are a little bit different than sex therapists. We're actually quite different. So I don't I think I'm still a little, I tried doing research on like what sexologists do exactly. I do know some of them practice sex therapy, but I don't touch clients. For example, there are like body workers who help clients have sex. For example, if someone's disabled and they need help finding certain positions that work for them and their partner, there are people for that. But for us, sex therapists, we are, I like saying it's therapy with a twist of talking about sex pejoratively or like relationships or things that you wouldn't feel comfortable talking to a general therapist about, for example, who only specializes in mental health. So what makes sex therapy different is that we do receive extra education around sexuality, sexual health, and interventions that we can use. And then we also read books, we listen to podcasts that are very helpful so that we can, further our knowledge. So yeah, it's like we practice therapy. I don't know if I answered your question. Now I feel like I'm getting off tangent.
No, you're good. I get it. Like, okay, sexologist might be like a little more hands-on, where you're more about the mind and like communication, right?
Okay, I have the definition. So sexologists are people who study sexual relationships. It's like, yeah, so then they've gotten a degree or they've done a lot of learning in like the science behind sexuality. Sex therapists are the ones that we practice it in therapy. So we're like, psychologists can also be practitioners. I think the difference here that I'm talking about is like sex. I think they're called body workers. That's probably not the right name. There are plenty of other names, but they are more hands-on.
I think it's a guru.
Yeah, okay, like a sex guru. I've heard that term before too, as well. Yeah. So I think I'm not a sexologist. I am a sex therapist.
Awesome.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I don't know if that's helpful.
No, I get it. Because I actually also had a sexologist on the show, and I asked her, I'm like, well, what's the difference between a sexologist and a guru? And she's like, I don't know. So,
okay, I listened to that episode. Yeah.
Oh, did you?
That was really neat.
With Hannah?
Yeah. So, yeah, with Hannah. So she explained how she was a sex worker before, but now she's a sexologist, where it doesn't sound like she's doing hands-on things.
Right.
At least to my knowledge. Yeah. I think so you don't have to put this in, but I think some sexologists, they do sexological body work. I've heard that term too. I just don't want to make people think that like all sexologists do that. Because some people think sex therapists touch their clients, and that's like the first thing I say. I do not touch you. All are closed, stay on.
I mean, yeah. That brings it to a whole new level.
Yeah, exactly.
Where would someone find you if they wanted to contact you directly?
Yeah, so you can find me on Psychology Today. If you go on psychologytoday.com, you can actually find all therapists around your area, and you can filter out by race, age, I think, different modalities and specialties. I really like Psychology Today. And if you type in my name, I'll pop up. You'll see my profile, and you can actually email or call me there directly. So that's like one really easy way. The other way is Instagram. I do have an Instagram that I can give you, so you can post it somewhere as well, and they can also message me through there. And I also have a personal website, so I can send that to you too.
Okay,
and
perfect.
then people can just reach me through. Yeah, you guys can just reach me through my website as well. I'm very handy with my email. It's like my new texting. So I'll respond typically same day within like a couple hours.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure I have all links at the bottom of the show notes.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess for those of you who are interested in just seeking therapy in general but are afraid to take the leap, I would greatly encourage it. Just, I know it can be very intimidating. I know finding the right fit can be very hard. Trust me, like I've gone through my fair share too of I mean, I'm probably at my 5th therapist now at this point. And finding the right fit can be very hard. But once you do find that right fit, it could be very life-changing. So if you do have any questions about how to find a therapist, feel free to contact me, or even Tiffany. Maybe like Tiffany, if you want to if they reach out to you, they can reach back to me. But yeah, I think it can be very helpful, especially when you're feeling alone or you're feeling like something's off or there is something that you really want to talk about. But making that first step is the hard part.
Right. Hopefully when, because like I was saying earlier, there's so many things out there. Like, maybe you wanted to try a life coach, but you didn't want to spend the money. Maybe you want to try hypnosis, or there's just so much out there. So why not just try it? Try it on my dime.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's really, again, like very generous of you to do that, Tiffany. So yeah, I guess for listeners who are listening, like take advantage of these resources.
Yeah, I mean, they're there for you to try. They're there for healing. It's not just, I hate my job, let me go see for a therapist. It's got to be a little bit more in depth than that. But absolutely, I want to try to make this world at least a little better of a place if we can.
Yeah, that would be very good.
Yes.
Yeah, very necessary, I would say.
I agree. We need a lot of that. So.
Yeah.
All right. If you don't have anything else.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me on. It's such an honor.
Aw.
Being that middle person between helping people in their relationships and being the bridge actually for people, like communication within relationships, for example. Sometimes it can be very hard to communicate things to partners. So I would be kind of that mediator to help with, okay, how can we communicate that in a manner that's not attacking, but in a very welcoming way so that partners truly understand each other.
Right. Are they at the same session or do you do them separately?
Oh, no, it's the same session. So like couples therapy, they at the same time. Yeah.
Gotcha. I didn't know if like, okay, I have it with one person, then one person, then bring you together. And
sometimes there will be times when like it would be helpful to split the couple and then bring them back because there can be like high tensions.
I can totally see that.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll be like, okay, let's take a break. Let's do individuals first. Then we'll come back.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you know somebody who could benefit from this episode, please be sure to share it with them. All links will be at the bottom of the show notes. Make sure to check those out. Do you want to be on the show? Just as easy as sending me an email, crimeovercocktails@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out those podcasts of the month on the Deluxe Network, Growing Up Bananas, as you heard earlier, and In a Pickle. If you're one of these pickleball fanatics, that's right up your alley. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk crime another time. Bye.